Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. Each week, She Rebel Radio brings you insights and advice from women entrepreneurs who transformed their prestige prisons into daring entrepreneurial success stories. Now, here is your host, Lulu Nins.
Welcome to episode 39 of She Rebel Radio, How to Find Psychological Safety in Times of Uncertainty and Crisis with Rachel Cashman. Rachel is the CEO of the Circus Consultancy, a specialist consultancy supporting people with psychological safety in the workplace, and she is one of only 2 master license holders in the country who are trained and accredited to deliver the UK's first predictive and academically peer-reviewed psychological safety tools. Psychological safety is crucial for women who are finding more meaning and significance in the self-actualization process. Rachel, who has had a fascinating career prior to running her consultancy, is the woman to help us during a worldwide pandemic take a deeper look at our needs for safety and security. Rachel, it's great to have you here. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me and making the space to talk about these issues during what is a challenging and interesting and different time for everybody and for all of your listeners.
It is, and I know we were talking about having you on She Rebel Radio, and that was before all this had kind of kicked off, and I felt it really important to bring this episode forward because I know you'll have some amazing things to share with the listeners today.
Yeah, I think it's taken, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken the country in some ways by a bit of surprise in terms of the changes that it has created in everybody's everyday living, but also for women in their everyday working and for entrepreneurial women in their everyday business. And I hope that we can give some hints and tips, some understanding and some tools for She Rebel Radio listeners today.
Yes, I'm looking forward to diving deeper into this topic. And I'd love to kick off with, what is psychological safety, for those that don't know, and how does it differ from, say, physical safety?
Sure. So in a nutshell, psychological safety is the environment or the conditions where you feel that you can be your authentic self. So you feel included, you feel that it's safe to contribute, that it's safe to learn, that it is safe to be or to expose or to share your vulnerability, and also that it's safe to challenge the status quo or to challenge the expected cultural norms of a situation, and to do so and be all of those things without fear of embarrassment, marginalization, or punishment. And when we think about women, whether they are women in positions of prestige who you work with, women listeners today who might be starting up their own businesses, how common is it for women who speak up to be punished or embarrassed for doing so? I've certainly been told off for it in the past. And that is why I think it's really important that we recognise that psychologically safe environment.
Absolutely. And I love how you said that being safe to contribute, and it's a big thing of women not contributing within positions of prestige, and then that having even a knock-on effect in creating their own businesses, being worried about what their contribution is and how to deliver it.
Absolutely. And we're taught, aren't we, that we have to compare ourselves to others, that society is about competition, but actually if you're consistently comparing and competing, you're restricting your ability to connect with others. And part of the psychological safety environment is that connection with other people and that support network.
Really important. And how would you describe the difference between physical safety for people?
So some of the feelings and the emotions attached with psychological safety can be the same in terms of physical safety. So, if you are in an environment, a physical environment, walking down a street, late at night, then I would always be conscious about being able to be my true self in that environment. But what psychological safety is around how your mind focuses the conditions for you to speak up. So it is all about how the emotion and the logic and the emotion connects with your ability to verbalize and be your authentic self, rather than the kind of physical restrictiveness of an environment, though that can sometimes play a part.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Thank you so much for clarifying. And why? Let's start with the crisis and the pandemic that we face, which, as we said, when we talked about doing an episode like this, that wasn't the case. But as we are here and in a time of extended uncertainty, and the pandemic is triggering, feelings of safety or not being safe for people, how is this affecting us and our psychological safety, would you say?
People across the globe are being triggered at the moment in light of the COVID-19 panic. And the way that I would describe it in a normal environment, and this applies equally to today, is VUCA. And VUCA is an acronym that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And if somebody is either working in a VUCA environment, they're leading a VUCA environment, or they're setting up their own business or their own enterprise within a VUCA environment, that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity are the things that will spark the psychological safety to be affected. And if you think about COVID-19, it speaks to every single one of those. Yes. So it is of no doubt why people are responding in a way with heightened anxiety, feeling a bit more on the edge.
Yeah, totally. One thing I was going to ask you, actually, I noticed I've been sitting out on my doorstep quite a lot because it's far more sunny than the back garden. And I've noticed with people going on their exercise and their walks that even though it's quite warm, people are still wrapped up in lots of clothing, scarves, and stuff that you wouldn't normally see in this heat. Is there a reason for that?
I think that's about protection. I think there's something symbolic about controlling your own environment and your own space. And I'll come on later on, I think today, to talk about control and autonomy and what you can control in a VUCA environment. And I think it's really interesting what you say, because I too have been sat on our doorstep. And whilst people have been, wrapped up in scarves, you might not be able to see much of their faces, but you can tell they're offering a smile or a wave from, 6 foot across the road.
Yeah.
And I like to think in this environment, I have a personal VUCA to respond to COVID, which is we need to connect with our values. We need to have understanding of others. We need to connect with other people, and we need to have an agility in how we operate. So part of my own COVID VUCA is to connect with some of those people that might be responding. I'm still out there in a t-shirt and my running kit, and they might be in their winter woolens. But if that's what's comfortable for them, it's how can I connect with them so that we are collectively together supportive of each other's safety.
Yeah, it's so important, actually. I think one of my cats has been a massive part in that, because she's been rolling around for everyone in the front garden as well.
Oh, bless. Pets are really important at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. They're crucial, aren't they, at the moment, to being at home. Amazing. So I love that. Your own personal VUCA response to COVID-19, which you said is values, understanding, connection, and agility.
Yes, absolutely. So values for me is really important. And I think a crisis situation like this helps everybody reassess who and what is important to them. But from as a female entrepreneur, it's making me think, which bits of my business are really important to me? Who do I do business with? Who are the people that I think are offering the right type of response to the crisis? And how do I want to connect? Will I go an extra mile for them in thinking commercially about my business in the future? So there is a kind of a heartwarming edge to that, but there is also a business savvy edge to that as well. And I think both of those are equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. They totally are. With valuing, what's important and how you're responding, how people are responding. It's really important. What is the feminist perspective or the female perspective, whichever way you want to look at it, on the psychological safety for women, and how does it differ for us? And kind of two parts, really, in general, but also within the current crisis.
Yeah, really interesting. And I think in general, psychologically safe leadership, or conducting yourself in a psychologically safe way, hits all of those attributes that are traditionally seen in many women, not all, but in many women. So the empathy, leadership through empathy, really activated listening, where we have models of leadership that look at people's intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. I do a lot of work with the NHS and used to work for the NHS, and where I worked in an emergency department with a group of female consultants, the culture was quite often one that was psychologically safe by dint of habit, because people thought in a different way. That group of leaders thought in a different way versus an ED department that was led solely by a group of men. But what's different about that, though, is the male group would quite often have a very clear hierarchy and grip in that emergency situation, where the women's group would quite often be thoughtful, understanding, empathetic. And actually, it's how do we maintain those psychologically safe attributes in a way that can be applied into different settings. And in the pandemic, I think it's really fascinating how the pandemic is showing up the role of women in society, particularly as we now have a blend of work and home life. So I'm talking to you today from our bedroom in our house, where me and my partner are both working, full time. We've always both worked. We've always had a very equal relationship. He works for the NHS. I work with the NHS. My business is no less important or more important than his business. Since we've been working together, he's had the office every day. His phone calls have taken priority. We've fallen into a trap, and I hate myself for it. That is, I am taking on the kind of traditional women's-y roles of checking the kids' break time and homeschooling and things. And actually, it's making me feel even more volatile, uncertain, ambiguous about my business. And so there is a really good example of where this pandemic has pushed me as a woman into a psychologically unsafe place. And I'm meant to be an expert in this stuff. I've had to check myself in and have a conversation at home and about my work.
And it is, it's true to say, isn't it, as women, for a long time been wanting to work more from home, because of the availability to home life that's there. But actually, that's also bringing up lots of difficulties.
Absolutely. And I think where it is something that is around control and choice and autonomy, then it's more of a positive experience. But we're all operating in an unknown environment that we've never done before, where we're kind of under semi-house arrest and having to feel our way.
Yeah.
And we will go through that traditional, forming, storming, norming, performing cycle, probably just in time to all go back to reality again. And then we'll have to readjust, yet again. A couple of other things I think about the pandemic is, one, if we look at women workers across society, women in key worker roles responding to the pandemic, I think the statistics are like, 80% of the key worker roles that have been identified are professions that are predominantly women.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting dichotomy there about what does that also mean for women who want to achieve, set up businesses. I know you've done some work about women in innovation and business recently. And I think that's going to be massive in how we think about a feminist perspective on women and work moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, you said there, and it was a question that popped into my mind when you were introducing psychological safety. Is it fair to say that women tend to, within a business setting or leadership setting, feel more psychologically safe in a group of just women than a mixed group?
Yes, I think they do, but possibly sometimes for the wrong reasons. So one of the things that I do around the predictive measurement tools of psychological safety, and this will come out a lot, is the feedback we'll get from staff. They will say, it's a family-friendly environment here. It's like one great big family working here. It's totally safe here, because we're all very, very supportive of each other. So organisations and teams will score really highly on the empathy scale. But then when you ask the questions about, is it safe to challenge and is it safe to speak up, you tend then to find that irrespective of the gender of the leaders, there will be an underlying fear to speak up or to challenge. So all leaders have to work very hard at that. And it manifests in different ways. So in some cultures, it manifests in kind of quite machismo bullying. In other cultures, it manifests in kind of cliquiness, and you can only speak up if you're in the right clique.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating, and how that then affects individuals within those teams. And if you're setting up a business, that type of activity will flow through your customers, it will flow through your associates, it will flow through the relationships that you have.
Totally. And what is the impact of being psychologically safe, and what is the impact of not being that way?
Sure. So I'll answer your second question first. The impact of not being psychologically safe, at the hardest edge, it's emotional and physical burnout. So if you think about the kind of pressure performance curve, you have this bit at the kind of far left of the curve where you're a bit complacent, you're coasting, and then you steep up and you're thinking, oh, this is getting a bit exciting. I'm on my money here, I'm on my mettle, I'm performing really, really well. And then poof, you're off the side of a cliff because you're burnt out.
Yeah.
And unless you really consider how to balance the various things that make up psychological safety that impact upon it, you'll hit that burnout. You'll get a crowding of thought through brain fog. Your immune system will be impacted. The cortisol will be raging. So
and I was going to say, within that, we can have that in positions of prestige and when in our businesses.
Absolutely. And it's irrespective. I think I've worked with women who are sole traders, who work independently, who are founding businesses, and women who are part of the corporate infrastructure, and the impacts are the same on them, irrespective of the causes.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's kind of 5 areas that people should think about when they're looking to balance, and if you want, I can run through those very, very quickly.
Yeah, please do.
This is how to balance the impact. So at a basic kind of primary level, it's balancing the energy: sleep, food, drink, hydration. The second one is around your future focus. So it's about, if you're not psychologically safe, you're going to lose your sense of purpose, and you're going to get stuck and feel held back. If you're not psychologically safe, you're going to lose your inner drive. So you're going to find your confidence starts to ebb away, and your self-belief will not be sustainable. And your thinking, you will lose your ability to be adaptive and response to challenges. So you'll start to get in a bit of a fug, really, about everything, if you're not feeling in a psychologically safe environment. And finally, your relationships, that ability to build open and trusted relationships and ask for help, also starts to ebb away. So it's really important that for each of those areas, we think about, what is it that I as an individual need to balance each of those things.
Yeah, so important. And I recognise every single one of them when I left my position of prestige cropping up. Yeah, totally. So what is the impact of being psychologically safe? Or had you finished because you said one of the impacts of not being is the emotional and physical burnout. Are there some more there, or is that within?
I think each one of the 5 areas I've just described, you will find at different points of the psychological safety kind of wheel, if you like, they will be affected in different ways.
Yeah.
So what we would when I work with individuals, I always talk to them about those 5 areas and keeping them in check at a different point for them. The one that's often the most obvious to go is your hydration or your sleep. And you notice that first, that kind of primal level. But people don't often realise if their confidence is just starting to incrementally ebb away, or if they're maybe not responding in the way that they would normally respond to things. So trying to keep those 5 areas in check is a really positive way to think about the balance of your psychological safety.
Absolutely. Yeah, really important. And things that you can notice in terms of how tangible they are. If you're not sleeping, if having difficulty in relationships, not responding to stuff as you usually would, really important. So what psychological safety tools and principles can be of use to us, either when facing those symptoms, as it were, or just in general as a preventative mechanism?
So I've got the ABC of responding to psychological safety. So the first one is autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about understanding what it is that you can completely, with a sense of autonomy, control. At the moment with COVID-19, people feel there's little they can control in the external environment. So find that one thing. Is it I'm going to write a marketing plan for my business, or what's that task, that thing that you could just get on and do? So that's A. B is about belonging, and it's who's your tribe. Understand who your tribe is for right here, right now, in the circumstances that you're in, and connect with that tribe. So I had a Zoom meetup the other day with a group of practitioners. I've never met any of them before, but 20 minutes on a video conference, and suddenly I felt lighter at the end of it. So find your tribe, have belonging. And the C is competence. So be confident in your competence, even if in the current environment, your competency and your skills is not needed right now. And lots of, particularly small businesses, lots of women are finding that, contracts are being postponed because of COVID-19. Try not to let that lose your confidence. Instead, use the lockdown to upskill. And I'm not talking about, you see on Instagram, everybody saying, you can suddenly do everything you've ever dreamed of by being in lockdown. I can't bear that because it's not realistic for people. But
no, a lot of people have got less time, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're balancing, your whole life in four walls of your house. So but is there one book you can read, one article, one thing that you think, actually, I'm really interested in that, and that might help me think about my flexible thinking or my inner drive? So last week, I noticed London Business School was doing a series of free lectures on economics. Now, I'm not an economist. I've always thought, I wonder if I could understand it. Yeah. It was 45 minutes. I joined it, didn't understand half of it, but I loved it. And it made me really just feel intellectually stimulated and that I was semi-competent at something. So autonomy, belonging, competence.
Yeah, so important. I think for me, it's been around that is the podcast definitely has been, a massive passion project since I started it, but even more so with the pandemic. And also that's something I can control and change the content to be really appropriate. And also cooking, like I'm obsessed with certain meals on certain days, so I know which day it is.
It's a really good example. It's really good because
it's always been a bit of a thing for me, but it's almost become a neurosis, but in a good way.
That's it's nourishing yourself,
is.
Right? It's you're thinking about that. Speaks completely to the energy pillar I talked about before, about looking at your inner drive and your energy through your cooking. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and what I can control, right? I can control what I eat on what day, so I know what day it is.
But I think what's so important about what you said there, Lulu, is it's nothing massive. It's simple tasks, but really, really important. And it's things that can be incorporated into your everyday that creates that environment that for you is psychologically safe, that enables you to run your business, do your podcast, and live a healthy and happy existence during the lockdown and during this pandemic.
Yeah, it's so important. And it's, I've been working at home for 5 years, and practicing yoga and having a walk on the beach has been two things that I've been doing religiously in lockdown, but I've been doing that for 5 years anyway. But to keep that psychological safety, because all of that was so triggered for me, not that I was able to articulate that at the time. But also a new one for lockdown for me is colouring in.
Oh, wow.
That's been another new thing that I've just, for that mindfulness and to empty, so I don't get the brain fog and things like that of overthinking about business, and just to, let things go.
Yeah, it's funny. My mother-in-law actually told me the other day that she has started cloud watching again. So she is a very active woman, very active in her community, but she's in the shielding group that's not allowed to leave the house for 12 weeks. And she has been lying in her conservatory with a book about the clouds and studying the clouds. She's loving it.
Yeah. My mum has actually started her Tapestry again. I remember her doing that when I was a teenager, when there was quite a lot of stress going on, actually. So she's taken that up again, and it's you don't have to go out and conquer the world, but maybe just find something that you do find relaxing and can be present with.
And I think it's really important. My hope in the negativity of this disease is that what comes out of the pandemic will be a culture of kindness and a compassion that's brought to individuals and to leading and to the way we engage with each other again.
That really real connection with each other, and also that real connection to nature, which is so important.
Yes, I mean, I think I breathe a sigh of relief every day that we are here in Brighton, and just hearing the seagulls, which I've always hated on the roof, but suddenly they're my new best friends. Because it's that the springtime, the world does keep turning, no matter what else is happening to us in our communities.
Yeah, and it's noticing all those small things is really important, for sure. So how can we use these tools to help others around us feel safe, and why is it crucial that we do that?
I think everybody can adopt psychological safety into their everyday life and into their everyday communities. And the one thing that I like about psychological safety is that it's a real rejection of kind of paternalism and false fellowship. It's actually about enabling and supporting other people to be their authentic self.
Yeah.
So I'd suggest to your listeners that they ask themselves some questions about psychological safety. So, are you prepared to be an inclusive bridge builder and invite other people to join your networks, your communities, your tribe, your groups? How can you encourage other people to learn in a different way? And how can you give autonomy to somebody else just through kindness and compassion? An example of that is that, I sent a text message to somebody who I know is working in a difficult scenario at the moment and will be doubting herself. And I just sent a text message saying, I bet it's tough. Just remember, be you and you'll be fine. And she rang me straight back. I wasn't expecting it. And she was crying. And she just said, that just came at the moment. Now, it was nothing to me. It was a quick text message. It was, cost barely anything. But it meant an awful lot to her. And I think as a feminist, and a very proud feminist, I always think, how can I and how can you provide air cover to your feminist sisters so we have their back when they want to challenge the status quo and their status quo? And it'll be different for all of us. But what can we do through our communities, through the podcast, through our one-to-ones with people, to help our sisters know that it's all right to do that, and we're always going to be there for them?
Yeah, so important. And do you think, the current pandemic and crisis is going to potentially open the door for women to provide that air cover and challenge the status quo that has been there for so long because of the changes that have been forced?
Yeah, I mean, I think, thinking back into your wartime Britain and the role that women had then, elevated around whether it was, my grandmother was a woman that drove vehicles and helped people escape from Belsen, or whether it was the code breakers, or whether it was the people, the women left back here that were running effectively running society. I think every 100 years or so, things happen in society that enable women to progress further on that journey to, as you would say in your hierarchy, to self-actualization. And I think this pandemic will enable women to see their strength. And I think the strength comes out of what I like to call the kind of kindness economy, the empathetic leadership journey that creates the conditions for people to be who they need to be and who they actually are. And women are the best at doing that, the best at driving that. And I do think there's an opportunity for women to show that in this time of adversity.
Yeah, that absolutely is. I love that. And what would your final bit of advice be for women who are wanting to do that in this kindness economy and to step forward with their strengths and authenticity?
I think it would be take one thing every day that you think helps you achieve the next step to self-actualization for yourself and for other women that you know. Whether that is a text message, whether it's doing something for yourself, like reading that article, but small steps that help you be your true authentic self, because every step really does matter.
Yes, small steps for womankind, and supporting each other is so crucial to that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And think of different ways that you can do that. If there's one thing that this pandemic is teaching us, is that the physical restrictions we're currently living in, it's physical distancing. It doesn't need to be social distancing. And I think that differentiation is really important.
Yeah, I agree, because we've got, so many opportunities to connect and stuff online, so much so some people are feeling a little bit overwhelmed by that, which I think is why it's so important, as you say, to find your tribe and to connect and stay connected with them, which is actually, for me, when I started my own business and first left work, which is why I started creating a community of women that has followed through, and, the She Rebel community, etc., because it was something that I needed and found that other women needed as well, and they were having their journey of self-actualization and changing their status quo.
And I think we're quite lucky in the community that we live in Brighton. There are lots of feminist networks and women's networks that grow, but I'm very conscious that it's not the same across the country. It's not the same across the world. No. And so She Rebel Radio can help be that one piece of leverage that a listener thinks, do you know what, I'm going to do this wherever they are in the world. And what a brilliant endeavour that you've created right there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing to see, all the different places that the podcast is being listened to on. And I would love to know, before we go, what is next for you and the Circus Consultancy? And please do share the reason for the name of your business, if you feel cool.
I will. So
story.
So next for Circus Consultancy is I am working on the National Psychological Safety Recovery Programme for the NHS post-COVID-19.
Amazing.
So that's with the NHS nationally and the Department of Health and colleagues in Harvard University who are specialists in psychological safety. And I'm also beta testing an online psychological safety training tool that doesn't exist in this country yet. And hopefully I'll be rolling that out over the course of the next year. So that's two pretty exciting things that I hope will make a big difference.
Absolutely.
It's the Circus Consultancy means a lot to me, in part because its values are based on my own experiences of having worked in quite psychologically unsafe environments and wanting to do things differently and support others to do things differently. And the name comes because I was born in a circus in Australia. And I always vowed if I ever started my own business, I would call it the Circus. Irrespective of what it was, I would have to make the offer, meet the name.
Yeah.
And I was raised in Scotland, and the spelling of my business is the Scottish Gaelic spelling of Circus, because when I went to register the company, some big advertising agency had already taken every other variation of the word circus, but that's okay.
But I love how it's worked out perfectly and so authentically to you and your background and your values.
Yeah, it's fate played a very happy hand there, I think.
It certainly did. Thank you so much for sharing, Rachel, today. It's been fascinating.
It's a pleasure, and I hope that people can take something from it and enjoy it.
And we look forward to seeing what's coming from you over the next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for tuning in to She Rebel Radio. And as we stated at the outset of this episode, psychological safety is crucial for women who are finding more meaning and significance in the self-actualization process. So before you go, I wanted to make sure that you check out the 3 Keys to Self-Actualization self-study course, which is available for you right now. Unprecedented times is a call for unprecedented women, and this is the time where more women are needed to step up and into their full potential. During the 4-week course, I share how to unlock the doors keeping you stuck in prestige rather than moving into self-actualization and your higher purpose. Check out the details of the course at lulumins.com/3 keys. That's lulumins.com/3 keys, as in the number 3, and the link is in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I look forward to speaking to you very soon.
Thanks for listening to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. She Rebel Radio is executive produced and hosted by women's advocate and coach Lulu Mintz. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. You can find Lulu Mintz on Facebook and LinkedIn at Lulu Mintz and on Instagram at LuluMintz_biz. Until next week, keep rebelling against the rules and designing success your way.